In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made many people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. If you've ever wanted to ask God why your life sucks, then Joe, Clyde, and Leon might have wanted a word with you. These three men were featured in The Three Christs of Ypsilanti, a psychiatric case study about paranoid schizophrenia. All three men believed they were Jesus. The book's author, Dr. Rokeach, decided to put them in the same room and let them fight it out. Dr. Rokeach was inspired by an article about two women who were both the Virgin Mary. The women were made roommates at a psychiatric hospital until one of them recovered from their delusions. I suppose the room was only big enough for one Madonna. Unfortunately, Dr. Rokeach's plan didn't pan out like that. Joe, Clyde, and Leon just pointed at each other and said, "Yeah, those guys are lunatics who think they're Jesus, but I'm the real deal." And this was back in the 60s, when being in a psychiatric hospital meant all kinds of nastiness. So really, Dr. Rokeach wasn't doing any favors here. But at least we got a movie out of it. The movie wasn't great, but Peter Dinklage is in it, and that counts for something, right? The idea of three Christs makes me wonder about the relationships people have to gods, and the relationships gods have to other gods, and the relationships gods have to themselves. So let's talk about it and come to terms with the regrettability of creation. In Christianity, there's one God in three parts, which are each totally God, but which are totally distinct from one another. This is the kind of thing theological schisms are born from. Even our place in relation to God is up in the air. In Thou Art That, Joseph Campbell says Christianity describes God as our creator and therefore separate from us. When the God closes himself and says, "I am God," he closed you too. But Campbell also brings up some Gnostic stuff, describing a unity between man and Jesus, and between Jesus and everythingness. Jesus used the same kind of vocabulary that Eastern gurus use. They have, in their minds, identified themselves with a mode of consciousness that then speaks through them. That is what he means when he says in the Gospel of Thomas, "Split the stick, you will find me there." This does not refer to the one who is talking to you, not to that physical body. It refers instead to that which he indeed, and you indeed, in fact, are. Thou art that. Putting it like this, Joe, Clyde, and Leon here wouldn't be wrong to say that they're Jesus, in the sense that we are all one in Jesus, or whatever, but they kept Jesus to themselves. No one else was allowed to be Jesus. Everyone else was an imposter. Maybe we should look to those Eastern gurus Campbell mentions. I once took a quarter of college classes on Hinduism, and that means I know everything about Hinduism, and I'm never wrong. Hinduism has its own trinity, the Trimurthis, the ultimate reality Brahman personified as the creator Brahma, maintainer Vishnu, and destroyer Shiva. But what I'd really like to talk about is Shiva meeting Parvati. According to this website I found, Shiva sacrificed his own better half to promote the balance of the universe, and his better half was reincarnated as a woman named Sati. Sati sat in penance in the Himalayas until Shiva naturally stopped by to marry her. Great wedding, all the gods were there. But Sati's dad, Daksha, didn't like Shiva, because Shiva is kind of a hobo, honestly. So Daksha threw a big party for a ritual sacrifice, and Shiva wasn't invited. So Sati swung by the party and sacrificed herself. Shiva got real angry and cut off Daksha's head. When Shiva calmed down, he replaced the head with a goat head, and Daksha was fine, apparently. Shiva carried around Sati's body in mourning until Vishnu cut her into bits and pieces. Her bits and pieces became temples, yada yada. But Sati was reincarnated as Parvati. Parvati went straight to the Himalayas to meet Shiva, but he was still beat up about Sati. So instead of marrying Parvati, he made her his servant, and she eagerly accepted. But elsewhere, a demon was thrown down, and Brahma knew only the son of Shiva and Parvati could stop it. So the Lord Kama, god of love, shot his little arrow at Shiva, so he fell in love with Parvati. But you can't really fool a deity like that. Shiva knew what was up and kicked out Parvati. Parvati kept up the penance until she remembered that she was the reincarnation of Sati. Shiva also realized this, but was testing Parvati just to be safe. He came to her as a Brahmin, an elderly priest, to ask what her penance was all about. Parvati was all like, I'm gonna marry Shiva. And the Brahmin was all like, Shiva? Don't you know Shiva's a hobo? And Parvati was like, but I'm the reincarnation of Sati. Shiva is my hobo. And Shiva revealed his true form and they got married. Later, Parvati wanted to take a private bath. She made a kid called Ganesh to guard the door for her. That's the kind of thing you can do when you're the reincarnation of Shiva's better half. But Shiva didn't know Ganesh was his son, so when Ganesh wouldn't let him in, Shiva cut off his head. Realizing what had happened, Parvati was overcome with grief, and Shiva felt sad too. So he put an elephant head on there. Old habits die hard, I guess. What I'm trying to say is there's a history of gods meeting themselves as other versions of themselves and not even knowing it, or even keeping secrets from themselves. Consider Ardhanarishvara, an androgynous composition of Shiva's male and female aspects, symbolizing Shiva's all-pervasiveness. From this perspective, the story of Shiva marrying Parvati is essentially a puppet show where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Why would such a being impose on itself like this? Why did Shiva sacrifice his better half to begin with? Another source says Sati was the incarnation of Adi Shakti, acting under guidance from Brahma and Vishnu, who thought a girlfriend would help Shiva not be such a hobo. Is Adi Shakti what this first source called Shiva's better half? What's the relationship between all these entities which come together to form the Godhead? As a squid born and raised in Los Angeles, I don't really have the cultural background to do more than ask the questions. I'm not exactly a Christian squid either, so I can't even answer the questions in the context of a religion I'm more familiar with. I can only answer the questions, say, using the language of a shiny Hollywood movie. Joe, Clyde, and Leon aren't the only characters in Three Christs to take up new names. Dr. Rokeach himself wrote letters to his Christs pretending to be other people. He promised poor Peter Dinklage he'd get to go to England. The doctor thought these letters would help his Christs, but still, crappy move. In the movie, at least, he eventually accepts that his Christs were only trying to save the people around them. At the end of the book, The Three Christs of Ypsilanti, Dr. Rokeach writes that ultimately he himself was cured of the godlike delusion that he could manipulate the beliefs of his patients. So how could Ypsilanti's Christs save anyone? Even if we accept the Gnostic position Campbell presented in Thou Art That, Joe, Clyde, and Leon are only the Son of God in the same sense that you find Jesus everywhere. Maybe they tapped into Jesus's same mode of consciousness that speaks through them, but it got them locked up as paranoid schizophrenics. Maybe they save us by warning us to accept Christ without jumping out a window trying to fly to England. Says Campbell, one way to deprive yourself of an experience is indeed to expect it. Another is to have a name for it before you have the experience. Carl Jung said that one of the functions of religion is to protect us against the religious experience. Ornate and detailed religions protect us from an exploding mystical experience that would be too much for us. Jung might interpret the Christs of Ypsilanti as people who had experiences, natural experiences, experiences which happen to humans sometimes, as a result of our biology and communal subconsciousness, but experiences which they and Dr. Rokeach weren't prepared for. Whether you call it Yahweh or Brahman, if you're not warned how to interpret a beatific vision, then if you accidentally tap into the mode of consciousness of the ultimate reality or whatever, you might think you're literally Christ, and then some equally deluded butthead might electrocute you. Instead, with the right mindset, such a religious experience could help you accept what we see as the imperfections of life. In The Meaning of Happiness, Alan Watts quotes the Upanishads, describing Brahman, the one reality expressed in everything. From his life comes the universe, and in his life the universe moves. From fear of him fire burns, and from fear of him the sun shines. From fear of him the clouds and winds and death itself move on their way. Only the wise who see him in their souls attain the joy eternal. Like dirt on Krishna's tongue, you are the all. If you ever experience it for yourself, then how you interpret the experience mythologically determines whether you're a laughing guru or a paranoid schizophrenic. I'm thinking too much again. It's all I do here at Thinkster. I planned to talk more about pop culture in this episode. I wanted to say it's okay that the latest installments of Black Mirror and Star Wars and Game of Thrones aren't up to snuff. But then I talked about Hinduism for like a million years, so let me keep this short. If you've ever played Magic the Gathering, chances are you've complained about Magic the Gathering. It's as true today as it was in 2002 when Magic designer Mark Rosewater wrote the article When Cards Go Bad, explaining why there will always be terrible cards. Not every card can be good, he says, even if the designers were perfect, and they aren't. But, he argues, having bad cards in the game makes the whole game better. Including bad cards, either accidentally or on purpose, means players have to interpret the cards they see, which gives more experienced players an advantage over new players who can't judge the power of a card. Besides, people enjoy finding hidden gems, cards which seem bad but are actually a broken combo waiting to happen. You can't have good cards which seem bad without bad cards which seem bad. In Magic, as in myth, bad things happen for the sake of the ongoing continuous unity which also produces good things. It might sound like a stretch, but this video is actually more consideration of the project I'd like to work on at OIST involving language processing using recurrent neural networks. I think a minimal brain could be trained to put on puppet shows like Ardhanarishvara. Its working theory of mind should be able to tell a story about characters with different experiences, even though the underlying dynamical system encompasses all of those experiences. I've learned some more about TensorFlow lately, but I've actually moved on to Keras, which uses TensorFlow as a backend. Maybe I'll talk about that next time. Bye-bye.